I want to refresh everyone's minds of one of the best nights of my life, which was back in 2017. I'm sure a lot of you remember this night. It was when we had been told that Jeremy Corbyn had no chance of winning the general election, and then we saw result after result come in the right way. And this is a story of one of those results and what happened to the candidate in that amazing result.
The number of votes cast for each candidate at the election is as follows. Nick Clegg, Liberal Democrats, 19,756. Jared O'Mara, Labour Party, 21,000.
So that's it. Nick Clegg defeated. Labour take Sheffield Hallam. Nick Clegg defeated.
Everybody that's got learning difficulties, everybody who has mental health issues, everybody who has a physical disability like me or has any illness, I will be on your side. I will be on your ally and friend and champion in Westminster. Let's all go on this journey together, guys. Thank you very much.
Oh, not mince my words. I made 3 attempts on my life. And I was harassed and hounded by the press. I was too scared to go home, and I was just a mess. I was shaking, I was crying, and that lasted for weeks. I feel like a phoenix from the flames, reborn from the ashes, and that is exclusively not thanks to me, thanks to my new staff. They just filled me with confidence. They put up with me being an idiot, and which a lot of constituents don't agree with.
People will wonder, here's a person clearly not suited to be a politician, battling with addiction issues. How on earth did they end up as your candidate to be an MP?
I think that the previous leadership of the Labour Party, frankly, lowered the bar in terms of what was acceptable to a completely unacceptable degree, and we can see that reflected in the case of Jared O'Mara. Other people who are now thankfully former Labour MPs or no longer hold the Labour whip.
Right, now I'm joined by Martin Mayer, who was on the NEC in 2017 at the time of that fantastic general election, but also was aware of what was happening with the selection of candidates at that time. And Martin, you've written to the media to try to correct this story that the leadership of the Labour Party was involved in Jared's selection. Can you tell us what actually happened there?
Yeah, I'm absolutely furious at that clip of Wes Streeting lying through his back teeth. This was actually a result of the division that was in the Labour Party, the fact that the right-wing forces refused to accept the democratic election of Jeremy Corbyn and did everything they could to undermine him. So we had, on the Labour NEC at the time, I was there as a delegate from my union Unite, we had a very split NEC. I would say 50-50 right and left. And I mean, by right, I mean the anti-Jeremy Corbyn forces. But they were backed up, of course, by central office under Ian McNicol, who were all horrified at Jeremy's election, and horrified too at the huge increase in membership of very enthusiastic, many of them very young people coming in, inspired by Jeremy's message of a brighter future. And what happened was when we came to the snap election that Theresa May called in 2017, Labour was trailing at 25% in the polls. The proposal came from Ian McNicol to the NEC that in order to get candidates into place as quickly as possible, there wasn't time to go to the LPs in the normal way. the NEC should make these decisions. Now, we oppose that. I remember myself speaking up very strongly that we must never take away this power from the CLPs. We are a democratic party. And it went to a vote, and we were very narrowly outvoted. I mean, sometimes we won the vote, sometimes we lost the vote. It was that close, the divisions on the NEC, but we lost that vote. And what ended up happening was that, quite outrageously, panels of 3 NEC members were set up. Applications it was like a self-nomination process. Any body of the Labour Party with 2 years service was allowed to put their name forward. So here you are, here's an application form. And those 3 NEC members were sent the application forms in the post, maybe 3, 4, 5 days in advance. And then we had a telephone conference where we discussed those application forms, and a decision was made. Nobody was ever interviewed, no background checks were ever done. Now, I mean, I know too, although I can't prove it, that those NEC panels were manipulated by Nichol's office to make sure there was always a majority, 2-to-1 right majority on those NEC panels. I mean, my experience was I was put on a panel for the West Midlands at a constituency there with 2 of my colleagues from the NEC who I knew were on the right, and I knew I didn't have a chance of getting the candidate through that I wanted.
Right, and I mean, there's no way Jeremy Corbyn, as the leader, could have said to Ian McNicol, "No, I want this to be done this way."
No, because the decision is made actually by the NEC. That's the governing body of the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn sits on the NEC as one vote.
So that call that Wes Streeting made is not true at all. You can't blame the previous.
You cannot
leadership.
blame Jeremy Corbyn. In fact, quite the opposite. We all opposed this system of NEC panels, and it was a proposal that was supported and pushed forward by Ian McNicol, Central Office, and the right wing, very narrow majority on the Labour NEC. And you can see why they wanted to do it, because the CLPs were by this time hugely inflated in numbers by new members supporting Jeremy Corbyn. Of course, given a chance to select their candidate, the likelihood is they would have selected a candidate. We all know the right we wanted to prevent.
And just to clarify as well that he Jared O'Mara was selected because they didn't know he was a Jeremy Corbyn supporter or anything to do with Jeremy Corbyn.
That's quite right.
They had no idea of that.
They would not have had any idea of that. And in fact, it was only after he was selected, and yes, it was after he was selected that he came out and declared that he was a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, which, you know, we were very, very surprised at, because very few of the candidates selected in this process ended up being on the left. So, I mean, the fact that he was young and disabled, as far as the panel was concerned, ticked a few boxes. And as far as I know, that was the main reasons of trying to sift out who to select on that telephone.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to bring on Lee Rock, who was involved in the campaign for Jared in Sheffield Hallam. Lee, thank you for coming on. What's your memory of Jared's selection? Did it go down well with members? What did you know of him before he was actually imposed, in a sense, as the candidate?
Thanks, Chris Gwynn, and thanks for inviting us. And my friend and Sheffield Hallam colleague Martin has given a background on how it came about. From our perspective, in the CLP, he was very much an unknown to us. This was a name that this was the name given to us. This was the candidate. As Martin says, we had no role in that selection. And it was interesting, the campaign, because the right wing, we were a right wing dominated executive in the CLP. I'd only been in the CLP for 10 months. And they didn't want us to campaign in Sheffield Hallam at all. The instruction was we were to go out to Penistone and Stocksbridge to campaign for Angela Smith of Change UK fame, or to North East Derbyshire for Natasha Engel. And the first meeting that we had, I think just before the selections had taken place, huge meeting for Hallam, over 100 people, and usually we were getting 30, 35, maybe 40. Lots of people, lots of younger people, lots of people that were returning from the left, to the Labour Party, or people like me for the first time in the Labour Party, having been on the left. And we wanted to fight. We thought we could take on Clegg. Nick Clegg had only won by 2,500, 3,000 votes in 2015. So we wanted to fight. And then the candidate gets selected. And as Martin says, when it came out that he had declared for Corbyn, that was great, because a lot of us would have had trouble canvassing for a right winger. We weren't just loyalists for the Labour Party in that sense. We wanted a left-wing candidate. So that really motivated us even more. And despite the inactivity of most of the CLP exec, we kind of took over the running of the campaign. And we did have, to his credit, we did have a CLP secretary who was a pretty middle of the road kind of chap, but he'd put in the years for the Labour Party locally, so he wanted a campaign. So we had that opening because of him. And we mobilised huge numbers of people within the CLP to go out, not just doing the voter ID. We took on the Bernie Sanders momentum idea of persuasive canvassing, where we would knock on the doors and talk to people. What were their concerns? What were their issues? And we would have that conversation and try and win people over. We had lots of people doing that. We held a workshop around how to do that. We had loads of people going out. And we ran a really good campaign. We had cars going around with speakers, huge amount of enthusiasm. The right wing couldn't believe the numbers. I remember on the actual day, you've referred to the day of the election, which was a fantastic day. You're absolutely right. We didn't know whether we were going to win. I wouldn't have put money that we were going to win, but we knew we were running a good campaign. And I remember turning up to the headquarters on that day, and the CLP secretary said to me, "Lee, I'm really worried we're going to have the numbers." And I was thinking, "You've really misjudged this campaign." And I remember smiling and saying, "Don't worry about the numbers." That day we had over 200 volunteers turning up to our campaign centre.
Wow, yeah, it was a great day. Yeah,
it was absolutely, yeah. And it was phenomenal. And shortly afterwards, the CLP executive resigned en masse, and the left took over. So it was an absolutely great day, really great day. I feel sorry for Jared, I have to say. I think he was a man younger than his years, a man out of his depth, and put into a position that he couldn't cope with. And the support that should have been there from the Labour Party regionally and nationally, and it wasn't given. And I think it was just, he was just put in a position he couldn't cope with. And, despite the things that he's now, being proved to have done wrong, I still feel very sorry for him. But people were enthusiastic. We should bear in mind that the Labour Party were running a defensive campaign nationally. We'd only lost this seat in 2015 by 2,500 votes. It was Nick Clegg. He was hated because of his coalition role. So it was a seat that could be taken, and we did it. And I think people were very proud of the campaign that we ran. It was very successful. Afterwards, Jared, unfortunately, the people who had around him weren't the left that had done the work. He was very much under the influence of the district Labour Party, which was the right, and the regional Labour Party, and they're the ones who put people around him. And quite frankly, they didn't really have his best interests at heart. And he was founder.
Well, I mean, I kind of want to hear a bit about a bit more about Jared's the stuff that he had to go through as an MP. And Tosh McDonald has agreed to come and speak on this. How are you doing, Tosh?
I'm fine, Crispin. How are you, mate?
I'm not bad. I think that anyone who's addicted to cocaine should be given support, and I find it quite difficult to see the people using it as a factional weapon about Jared. What's your view on what happened to Jared?
I think what happened to Jared is probably one of the saddest tales I've ever heard in my life. I didn't know Jared particularly at the time he stood. I know his dad and his uncle, both ASLEF members, both train drivers. I got a call from his dad, and I was travelling down to London one day to see if ASLEF could give him any support, and we did. We gave him a small donation to his campaign. I think we're the only people who did, to be quite honest. And Jared is a disabled kid, physical and mental disabilities. He was put in there. He had no support whatsoever, as the two previous speakers have said. And I remember one day we organised people to come and help him campaign, and we got on a train that started, I think, at Scunthorpe, picked people up on the way, some from Doncaster, some from Mexborough, some from Conisbrough, I think, different places. And we went and campaigned that day for him, and it was great. I brought a message from Jeremy Corbyn to him. And what really hurt me is once he got elected, it was a fantastic thing. I think, personally, I think the Labour Party would rather have had Nick Clegg there than a Labour candidate, particularly a left-wing Labour candidate. And it was, you know, it was obvious that that seat was winnable. Nick Clegg held the seat, the Deputy Prime Minister, part of the coalition that broke the pledge on tuition fees. There's a lot of students around Sheffield, and it was obvious that it was winnable. We went there, he won it, it was fantastic. When he made his speech, he had to borrow a jacket. He didn't even own a jacket. When he got to the Houses of Parliament, he was told off for not wearing a tie. He physically couldn't tie a tie. So they eventually gave him a dispensation for that. He was given an office that he couldn't open the door to. The support from the Labour MPs was next to none. We were at an event in Parliament, and my wife Nikki was speaking to Jared, and he'd got no support whatsoever. And there was another freshly elected MP there who said, well, I've been given a mentor, haven't you? And he hadn't. He'd got no mentors. We actually spoke to a friendly MP from the left who said, I just can't take anymore. He'd got so many people who was mentoring already. Nothing was given to Jared at all. And we have to ask where the whips were in this. You know, the whips aren't just about discipline. They're supposed to look after the welfare of members as well. And nothing was done for Jared whatsoever. It was heartbreaking to see the way he was treated.
And how do you think he's going to fare in this jail sentence? I mean, 4 years is I couldn't imagine how I'd feel if I had that kind of sentence. Do you think he's going to be able to get through this all right?
I really, really worry for him. I've kept in touch throughout, but not with Jared. I mean, I've been speaking to his dad. His dad's obviously, his family are concerned the way he's been treated. I think it's an exceptionally harsh sentence to give somebody, especially somebody with the issues that Jared has got. You know, I think you hit the nail on the head, Crispin, when you said about if somebody's got a cocaine habit, that's bad. It's an illness, and they should be treated with sympathy and support, not ridiculed for it. I've been watching Politics North this morning before I come on there, and Oliver Coppard, the new South Yorkshire mayor, the things he was saying about Jared, they were disgusting. You know, there's no support there whatsoever. And whatever happened once Jared was elected, he was elected as a Labour MP, and there should be a duty of care there to him still. And it's the opposite that's taking place. And I just have to say, as for Wes Streeting and the things he said, trying to blame Corbyn again, we know it's nothing to do with Corbyn. Martin Mayer's hit the nail on the head with the way they treated McNichol in particular, the way they treated not just Gerard, but other candidates who weren't suitable, who didn't fit their blue suit, hair product, pointy shoes image, as we like to say. Gerard, I believe what the Labour Party has done to him, if it was an employer, they would be up for unfair dismissal, the way he's been treated, constructive dismissal. It's been awful, and they should hang their heads in shame. And what it seems to me, I've been thinking about things recently, and I think if we look back to 97, when Blair got elected, the Tories were in free fall, but Blair had turned Labour into something which could hold the fort until the Tories regrouped and got back again. And I'm afraid that's where we are now. We've got a Labour Party with people like Starmer and Streeting who take bungs from private health companies, you know, get donations from private health companies. And they're in a position where if the establishment now believes they'd be a safe pair of hands to hold in government until the Tories get their act together again. And that's purely and simply all it's about. And there are not just Gerard, there are many, many truly heartbreaking stories of how people have been treated. You think a Labour Party, as I believe the Labour Party should be, would be there to care for people, care for societies and individuals. These don't care about either. The way Jared's been treated, it breaks my heart, to be quite honest.
Well, thank you, Tosh, and also thank you, Lee, and thank you to you, Martin, as well, for clearing up what was said by Wes Streeting, which was a load of nonsense and lies.
Can I add to that, Crispin? Because of course, what we now know, and I had an inkling of on the Labour NEC at the time, but we now know from the Ford report that when it came to funding MPs, McNichol was secretly channeling funding to anti-Corbyn MPs, many of whom were in safe seats. You know, that's where the money went. And these explanation about how they were told not to campaign Hallam, very much part of that strategy of not supporting anyone who was going to be pro Jeremy Corbyn and sending people actually to seats to support anti-Jeremy Corbyn candidates. You know, quite a shocking abuse of power and funding of members' money. So, you know, what we then had, and I can't prove this, but what I then believe is happening is that if Jared O'Mara had been an anti-Corbyn, he would have got funding. If he had been an anti-Jeremy Corbyn MP, I think he would have got support for his problems. And so it again comes down to the power of central office of the Labour Party, which was actually determining so much of what went on in that time. And Jeremy Corbyn and the leader's office were in fact isolated and undermined at every step, and actually with much less power and influence over the structure of the party than most people believe.
Right. Look, Jeremy Corbyn's on the call, so I mean, Jeremy, we just, I don't know how much you've.
I heard all of it, thanks. Yeah.
I'm just wondered, what would you like to say about what was just.
I will be very brief, Crispin, because I know we've got to move on. I want to say a huge thank you to Martin and Tosh, not just for the decent human way they've just spoken about Jared, but also their wonderful comradeship through many, many, many years, and always showing the best side of socialists. That is, we may have disagreements between us, we frequently do, but they are never abusive, never personal, and always supportive, and always recognizing the human needs of the other person. And I want to say a huge thank you to them for that. Jared O'Mara was selected under the circumstances that Martin explained. The crucial point happened on the day the election was called, when there was a meeting of the officers of the NEC. This was April 2017, and I did it by phone from a carers meeting I was at in Birmingham. And the proposal was that we should have panels arranged by the General Secretary to appoint candidates in seats where we didn't have a candidate. And quite clearly, there were a lot of seats we didn't have candidates in because despite what everybody says with hindsight, nobody was really expecting an election in June 2017. I proposed at that meeting that shortlists be drawn up and agreed, and the CLP have the vote on the candidate. That was the key point. And Martin is absolutely right on that. I lost that vote amongst the officers group, and subsequently the NEC endorsed the officers group decision, as Martin has quite rightly explained. And so from then on, the selection of candidates was, as Martin explains, by panels assembled by the General Secretary's office, and candidates were duly selected on that process. And so the idea that somehow or other I was on the phone the whole time appointing candidates is a bit far-fetched. From the moment the election was called, I was out on the road campaigning, and I spoke at 100 public rallies and events during that election campaign. So I didn't exactly have a huge amount of spare time to be doing all this kind of thing. And so I just got very quickly, because I know you've got to move on. I just want to say this about Jared. He's given me a lot of problems, to be quite honest. When he became an MP, he needed support. I provided him with an office near to the House of Commons chamber. It was the leader's room I gave him so that he wouldn't have to go long distances around the building to get in the chamber. And I tried to make sure that he had the support that he needed. But quite honestly, he wasn't really ready to be a member of Parliament. And I like to think that had there been a democratic decision by our comrades in Hallam, maybe people would have realised that perhaps Jared wasn't really ready for this work, and perhaps would not have been selected. I have to say that after he resigned from the Labour whip and the Labour Party, I did also make sure that he had support because I was, on a welfare level, very concerned about him. I have to say, and it's public knowledge, he then took several legal actions out against me, which have frankly thankfully all now been disposed of and settled. But it has given me 3 years of legal grief. Actually, most of this has been sort of below the radar, shall we say, but it's resolved now, and I'm relieved and pleased that it has. And I am worried for him because clearly what he's done is wrong. Clearly using public funds in the way that he did is absolutely wrong. And in that sense, the verdict of the court is correct. And I don't think anybody on this call is disputing that. But what I do worry about is what will happen to him now in prison. I'm not convinced that a custodial sentence will do anything but harm to him. He is somebody that needs help and support to get through all of this. And it is a very difficult situation, obviously, for him and his family. And despite everything, I would just hope we could be, as a society, slightly more humanitarian, not just towards Jared, but towards many others who are either victims of crime or commit crime, which is in some way or the other drug related, either criminal because of supplying drugs or because of the effects of taking particularly Class A drugs, which is what he was doing. And so I'm not quite sure what the current situation is with Jared, but I just want to say a big thank you to Martin, to Lee, and to Tosh for what they've said today and the way they've put it. If we're serious about our socialism and the kind of society we want to live in, then we've got to hold out the hand to people, sometimes give them advice they may not be very keen on receiving, but give it to them all the same. But look at the human being on the other side of it and try and help them get through some kind of crisis that they're facing at the present time. I don't want to go on any longer, Crispin, because I know you've got many things out, but I was watching. Well, no, I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
I think it's very good that you came on. Thank you, Jeremy.